100 people are stranded in the middle of a freezing wilderness, competing for a massive $250,000 prize. The setup pits 50 seasoned experts against 50 everyday amateurs who packed kids' tents and multi-packs of bottled water. On paper, the professionals possess a massive, almost unfair advantage. But dropping 50 highly trained individuals into a single camp introduces complex social and psychological variables. And as this experiment proves, knowing how to survive alone in the woods is completely different from keeping a group alive. This graphic breaks down the core requirements of group survival. Pillar 1 is shelter and environment. The experts immediately gathered raw materials to construct functional debris shelters, systematically piling leaves a foot thick to trap their internal body heat as temperatures dropped. The amateurs took the opposite approach, relying entirely on cheap store-bought gear, building structurally unsound stick forts, and pitching thin tents that left them exposed to the cold, wet ground. Based strictly on physical preparation and the ability to manipulate the environment, the experts established total dominance in the opening days. Looking back at our diagram, the second structural requirement is resource management. This is where physiological friction begins to test both camps. The amateurs brought in store-bought party mixes and snacks, and they completely destroyed their entire inventory within the first 48 hours. When it came time to replenish those calories, they possessed zero skills to forage or fish. The physical consequences hit almost immediately. Energy crashed, headaches set in, and empty stomachs drove early eliminations. The experts treated the forest like a grocery store. They constructed fish traps in the river, taught each other to forage edible plants, and buried food caches across the woods to secure a steady supply line. The experts mathematically secured the required calories, but enforcing strict control over rations meant restricting access. That rigid hierarchy introduced a hidden, long-term risk: resentment within their own ranks. This brewing tension faced an external catalyst when both camps were offered 50 cans of food. To win a reward, they had to hold the cans for 72 hours without opening a single one. The expert camp adopted a militaristic stance. Leaders aggressively restricted access to the cans and dictated severe rationing measures to force group compliance. This strict command structure backfired. Suspicious teammates soon discovered a secret stash of food that some of their own members had hoarded. Hidden in a private shed, this discovery completely shattered their intra-team trust. Over in the amateur camp, the response was entirely collective. Instead of hoarding, they established a transparent, shared community pantry, voluntarily slicing up single apples so everyone got a share. In the end, both teams technically passed the 72-hour test, but the experts' rigid methodology fractured their camp, while the amateurs used the shared scarcity to heavily reinforce their community bond. This brings us to the final element on our diagram: team dynamics. This pillar is fully tested right as a massive freezing rainstorm strikes the forest. Despite sitting inside dry, warm shelters with stable food rations, the professional team began to collapse. Members started lighting their rescue flares and quitting the experiment in mass numbers. The root cause of the exits wasn't the weather. It was an overabundance of type A personalities. You had dozens of highly capable individuals who were naturally oppositionally defiant, leading to bitter infighting over basic chores like wiping down a counter. High individual competence often correlates with an inability to yield control. When everyone in the camp demands to be in charge, the group loses the basic cohesion required to function. Meanwhile, the amateur camp was in physical ruin. Their flimsy tents flooded, their clothes were soaked through, and they were starving. Yet, rather than turning on each other under the pressure, they adapted. When a designated chef or a key team member tapped out, others voluntarily stepped up to fill the void, physically and emotionally carrying the burdens of the group. Sociologists refer to this as shared struggle. Mutual vulnerability and genuine empathy provide a psychological buffer. It gives individuals a social reason to keep enduring when their physical bodies are ready to quit. Technical wilderness skills, heavily insulated debris shelters, and strict supply rationing are excellent tools. They are entirely sufficient to keep a single, isolated body alive. But keeping a group alive requires emotional intelligence and community trust. The wilderness didn't defeat the experts. They defeated themselves by failing to master each other.